Rain hammered the towering windows of Blackstone Manor as ambulance lights flashed across the soaked driveway. Inside, servants stood silently along the marble hallway while doctors hurried toward the private bedroom of Arthur Blackstone, the 82-year-old billionaire whose empire stretched across continents. Newspapers called him the Iron King because he had built everything from nothing and trusted no one. Now his heart was failing, and despite all his wealth, every machine surrounding his bed whispered the same frightening truth: time was running out. His relatives filled the mansion, but none came to comfort him. They argued over wills, companies, and luxury estates, believing the old man could no longer hear them. His eldest nephew laughed quietly. "Just hold on one more night. Tomorrow everything changes." Arthur heard every word. A single tear escaped his closed eye. Among the dozens of employees, only one person never joined the whispers. Emma, the newest maid, quietly cleaned the room, adjusted the blankets, and spoke to Arthur as though he were perfectly awake. "Good evening, Mr. Blackstone. I know today hurts, but tomorrow hasn't arrived yet." One doctor smirked. "Why waste kindness on someone who's already gone?" Emma smiled without looking up. "Because people deserve dignity until their final breath." The room fell silent for only a second before laughter returned. No one noticed Arthur's fingers move. Emma did. She rushed toward the doctors. His hand moved. It was a reflex. One physician answered dismissively. "No, he hurt us." Another doctor rolled his eyes. "Focus on polishing the furniture. Leave medicine to professionals." Embarrassed, Emma stepped back, but she never stopped watching. Hours later, after finishing her shift, she carried her 6-month-old son Noah into the servants' quarters. Childcare had canceled at the last minute, leaving her no choice but to bring him to work overnight. She worried constantly that management would fire her if they discovered the baby. Near midnight, Noah began crying. Afraid of waking everyone, Emma gently rocked him while walking through the empty hallway. As she passed Arthur's bedroom, the crying suddenly stopped. The baby stared through the half-open door. Then he smiled. A bright, joyful smile unlike anything Emma had seen before. Inside the room, Arthur slowly opened his eyes for the first time in 3 days. His weak voice barely escaped. "The baby," Emma froze. Doctors rushed in disbelief. "You spoke," one gasped. Arthur ignored them. Instead, he stretched his trembling hand toward Noah. Without fear, the tiny child reached back, wrapping his little fingers around the billionaire's weathered hand. Something extraordinary happened. Arthur's heartbeat, which had been dangerously unstable for hours, suddenly steadied. Machines stopped screaming. The lead cardiologist stared at the monitor. Impossible. Another doctor checked every cable twice. There has to be a malfunction. But there wasn't. Arthur looked into Noah's innocent eyes, and tears streamed down the face of the man who had not cried in more than 50 years. "I remember," he whispered. Everyone leaned closer. Emma held her breath. Arthur smiled through trembling lips. "My daughter smiled exactly like him." The room turned silent. No one had ever heard Arthur mention a daughter. His relatives exchanged nervous glances. According to every public record, the billionaire had never had children. One nephew immediately interrupted. "He's confused. The medication is affecting his memory." Arthur's eyes hardened. "No." His voice grew stronger. "I buried my heart long before I built my fortune." Emma watched quietly as Noah giggled again, reaching toward Arthur's face. For the first time in decades, the cold old billionaire laughed. Arthur's laughter echoed through the mansion like something impossible. Servants stopped in the corridors. Nurses looked at one another in disbelief. The man whose icy stare had terrified boardrooms across the world now smiled at a baby no bigger than a pillow. Emma gently placed Noah closer, and the little boy rested his tiny hand against Arthur's wrinkled cheek. Another tear rolled down the billionaire's face. "I promised her I would protect our child," Arthur whispered. "Instead, I chose my empire." The room became painfully quiet. His nephew stepped forward. "Uncle, you need to rest. You're remembering things that never happened." Arthur turned slowly toward him. "Don't lie to me in my own house." The doctor's monitor suddenly beeped faster. Arthur struggled to breathe again. Medical staff rushed forward, but he raised a trembling hand. "Bring Emma back." The physicians hesitated. "Sir, she isn't medical personnel." "I didn't ask for a doctor." Emma walked carefully beside the bed, still holding Noah. The old man's breathing settled almost immediately. One elderly nurse frowned thoughtfully. His anxiety drops whenever they're near him. The lead cardiologist shook his head. "Emotion can affect the heart, but not like this." Arthur looked directly at Emma. "What is your son's full name?" "No, Carter, sir." "Carter," Arthur repeated softly, as though searching through decades of forgotten memories. Before he could say another word, a loud crash shattered the silence. Arthur's nephew had accidentally knocked over a wooden chest while pacing across the study connected to the bedroom. Yellowed letters spilled across the polished floor. Emma instinctively bent to gather them. One envelope caught her attention. Across the front, faded by time, were the words, "To my father, Arthur Blackstone." She froze. "This letter." The nephew snatched it from her hand. "That's private." Arthur's eyes widened. "Give it to me." "It isn't important." Arthur's voice thundered with surprising strength. I said, "Give it to me." Startled, everyone stepped back. The nephew reluctantly handed over the envelope. Arthur's shaking fingers opened it. Inside was a letter dated 32 years earlier. His daughter had written that she was leaving because she could no longer compete with his business. She had begged him to meet his newborn granddaughter just once. The final sentence broke him. "If you ever choose family over fortune, we'll be waiting." Arthur stared at the signature. "I never received this." Every eye turned toward the nephew. His face drained of color. It must have been misplaced. Arthur slammed his fist weakly against the mattress. "You stole 32 years from me." Silence filled the room. Emma noticed another folded document beneath the letters. She carefully opened it. It was a private investigator's report. The missing daughter had died in a car accident 28 years earlier, but her infant daughter had survived. Arthur could barely breathe. "My granddaughter." His trembling eyes fell upon Emma. "What was your mother's name?" Emma answered quietly, "Grace." Arthur closed his eyes. His daughter had named her baby after her own mother. Only 3 people had ever known that plan. The billionaire's hands began shaking uncontrollably. "Emma." She stared back, confused. "You aren't just the maid." The room stood frozen. "You are my granddaughter." No one spoke. Even the doctors forgot to breathe. Emma looked from the old photograph in the report to Arthur's tear-filled eyes, unable to believe what she had just heard. And Noah, still smiling in innocent wonder, reached toward his great-grandfather once more. Emma stepped backward, clutching Noah as though the truth itself might disappear if she loosened her grip. "That can't be possible," she whispered. "My mother told me my grandfather abandoned us before I was born." Arthur's voice cracked. "Because someone made sure every letter she sent vanished before it reached me." But all eyes turned toward the nephew. Cornered by the evidence, his confidence finally collapsed. "I did it," he admitted. "If your daughter returned, everything I expected to inherit would disappear. I hid every letter, every photograph, every message." The confession struck the room like thunder. Arthur closed his eyes, not in anger but in grief. "You stole more than money. You stole a family." Security escorted the nephew away while stunned relatives silently slipped from the room, realizing the fortune they had been counting on had just slipped through their fingers. Days passed, and Arthur slowly regained strength. His recovery amazed every specialist. They credited medicine, but the nurses noticed something else. Every morning Noah crawled onto Arthur's bed, laughing as the old billionaire read children's books with a smile no one had believed he possessed. The mansion changed with him. Cold hallways filled with music. Locked gardens reopened. Employees who had once feared him now found him, thanking them by name. One afternoon Arthur called the entire household together. "For decades I believed success meant building the tallest towers," he said. "I was wrong. Success is having someone who runs toward you instead of your money." He turned toward Emma. "You came here with nothing except kindness. Everyone overlooked you, yet you were the only person who treated me like a human being before anyone knew who you really were." Emma wiped away tears. "I wasn't trying to earn anything." "I know," Arthur replied. "That's why you've already earned everything." His attorneys entered carrying new legal documents. Arthur transferred a large portion of his estate into a charitable foundation dedicated to single parents, children's hospitals, and families struggling to afford medical care. Another portion established education scholarships in his daughter's name so her compassion would live on for generations. Finally, he handed Emma a simple envelope. Inside wasn't a fortune. It was a faded family photograph that had been hidden for 32 years. On the back, his daughter's handwriting read, "One day we'll all smile together again." Arthur looked at Noah. "I thought I was dying because my heart was weak." He gently lifted his great-grandson into his arms. "The truth is my heart was lonely." Months later, journalists gathered outside Blackstone Manor expecting another business announcement. Instead, they watched the world's once coldest billionaire planting a tree beside his granddaughter while a laughing little boy ran through the grass between them. The headlines celebrated the miraculous recovery, but those who had witnessed the truth knew the miracle had never been found inside expensive medicine or endless wealth. It had arrived in the tiny hand of a baby, the courage of an underestimated maid, and the power of unconditional love to awaken a heart everyone believed was beyond saving. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that compassion can change even the hardest life, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Because sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones the world never notices, until they change everything.